Listen. Before you are tempted to push all this aside by saying that African Americans have what they have and are what they are and are where they are because of their own innate shortcomings, I want you to consider some very important observations made by Dr. Claude Anderson in his book, Black Labor, White Wealth. Copyright August 1994 by Claude Anderson, Doctor of Education, Duncan and Duncan Incorporated Publishers, page 97. I quote, "It is common to hear Japanese, Chinese, and Germans being cited as model hard workers. Before blacks became obsolete as common labor in the 1960s, they were the models for doing the hardest, dirtiest, and most dangerous work. Ironically, conservative."
Now, you know why that changed in the 1960s? Because of Vietnam. Vietnam changed the dynamics of the Black American household. Well, another reason also was when they took prayer out of schools in 1962, that started the spiral, so to speak. But primarily it was the Vietnam War, because that was the first time in American history where you had that much of an influx of black soldiers being on the front lines, being embedded in a war for the United States. And it was the first time that there was more of an integration going on, because if you look at the past wars, you had, say, especially with World War II, there was much separation among the races. Much separation, just a totality of racism going on. So by the time the Vietnam War came along, and you know what, and you figure that, okay, and I always looked at it this way, whereas here's the Vietnam War, a war that nobody wants. It wasn't glorified, so to speak, like World War II. So when this war comes along, you want equal opportunity, equal whatever. Now they're telling the black soldier, okay, go ahead. And then they start drafting people. But it wasn't a war that nobody wanted, because for one thing, nobody knew what was going on in this war. Okay, nobody knew. It was an unwanted war. It was a war where it just put a bad taste in the mouths of Americans about their soldiers. So, and when that happened, it took a lot of the males out of the households. And in many of those situations, when the males came back, and remember, Vietnam was the war where drugs were prevalent. So when those soldiers came back home, they had to deal with issues of drugs also.
And government are suggesting that emulating these recent immigrants and their hard work is the cure for blacks' protracted poverty and high unemployment. Now you listen to this carefully and follow this carefully. Recommending more hard work for a race of ex-slaves is similar to curing an alcoholic by suggesting that the drunk do more drinking. See, they call us shiftless and lazy, and we don't want to work. Having never been for centuries of past labor is the bigger part of the problem. Not whether black people are willing to work hard. If blacks were unwilling to work, it would be understandable after 400 years of no pay to low pay. See, you have to know me now. To me, this is not personal. I'm dealing with principles, dealing with truth, and not personal, directed against anybody or any ethnic group. I'm trying, as I believe God is leading me, to bring this thing out in the open so we can bring closure to it, so we can deal with it. If we continue to sweep it under the carpet, then we'll never get rid of it. See? But you white folk and you modern black folk, listen, you need to realize that your ancestors, your slave, great grandmas and grandpas. Now think about this. They worked as slaves for 246 years without getting a paycheck. Now, how do you expect people that have worked for 246 years while your mothers and fathers and great-grandparents, you white folks, were accumulating wealth? You got a 246-year head start and then wonder why we don't compete. You must be crazy.
It makes me think about the term that's used when they say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And that's saying, well, if I can do it, you can do it. But like he said, there was a 246-year head start. And along with that 246-year head start, along the way, there were blocks in the road, roadblocks, so to speak. Like after World War II, when the white GI came home, he was benefited with many entitlements from being in the war, from being in the U.S. military. And, when it came to a home, he was set up real nice. He got grants, the whole 9 yards. But when the black man came home, he didn't get those opportunities. He didn't get those grants, or at least on the surface. On the surface, it may have seemed like that, but when the applications went in and it was found out that these soldiers were black, things were held up. Situations within were rewritten, targeting the black man, targeting the black GI. Oh yeah. Look it up. So there are roadblocks put in place to make things even harder. So don't think that this is a situation of, somebody's whining and crying about this and that. No, the system was designing things to hold us up anyway. Now, granted, we've come a long way. We've made strides in revenues, so to speak. But there are still systemic roadblocks in place. I kid you not.
But I want you to hear this. You need to hear it. Go, girl. I like this. All right, listen to this. Americans need to think about that before they throw too many rocks at supposedly lazy blacks. It's easy for people to criticize others when they don't know the whole story. People view blacks, when they want to criticize them for being at the bottom of the economic totem pole, as being unwilling to pull their own weight. They seem to think that we blacks are equal and therefore ought to achieve like everybody else.
And I want to add to that. When he says that, says, why can't we do better like them? For one thing, over all those years, there was somewhat of a brainwashing going on, where we had, and this is on purpose, where blacks were pitted against blacks. And it's kind of like the situation of light skin versus dark skin. We've been going at each other, defeating the purpose of coming together. So I just wanted to throw that in there also.
That would be true if we all started out on the same equal footing. But friends, that is not the case. Listen up. In a radio interview, Dr. Claude Anderson was asked a similar question about blacks in America. His answer was enlightening, to say the least. This was the question, and I quote, "Why can't black Americans do like Asians have done, or European Americans who have come to this country during the height of immigration and achieved the way that they have?" White folks, listen to this, because you're primarily the ones that criticize blacks for being lazy and shiftless and unwilling to work. Not all of you, we know that, so don't get personal. Here was Dr. Anderson's answer. Number one, blacks have never been treated the way Asians and Hispanics have been treated coming into this country. They have never been treated as an ethnic group. Secondly, all those other groups came into this country without the legacies and the baggage, the psychological baggage of having been enslaved and having been Jim Crow. Thirdly, they came into this country voluntarily versus having been dragged and bound, sold into this country. Fourthly, they came in with their culture intact, and they were able to use their culture to create businesses and create a broad sense of community and community unity. Fifthly, they kept their religion. They had their religion to again be a center of their lives for their values and to instill a sense of values for their families. And sixth, they could go back to their country of origin and use business opportunities to bring in artifacts to set up warehouses, wholesalers, and dealerships to sell artifacts from their culture. End of quote. Think about it. I am sure that many blacks as well as whites have never thought about it that way, never looked at it that way. What a disadvantage. And they want us to compete on an equal footing. That's like running a 100-yard dash or the 100-meter dash. And then you start out at the 90-meter mark, and us black folks start out at point zero, and then you cross the finish line and stand up there and say, "Now, how come y'all didn't do better in the race?"
They say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but it's never said that the bootstraps were handed to others and not black people. And now I'm seeing where some are saying we're entitled, and granted, it was directed at blacks who were acting foolish and ignorant. And we have those just like in any other race. But when it comes to black people, there's more sting in the criticism, as if there's a built-in loathing. Now, strides have been made, and most definitely, but if we don't stay ahead of the ignorance, hate, and disrespect from other races and from within ourselves, we'll continue to take 2 steps forward only to lose 5 in the progress. Enough said. Renew your mind.